Okay, everybody, can you hear me okay? Everybody's ready to go? This is a little tricky tonight. We're trying to improve our production value, but there's a lot to manage here all of a sudden. Thanks for being here with us, everybody. I'm Richard Horncastle. I'm honored to be your host for tonight's discussion. The Chamber is really proud of its role in bringing together stakeholders in an open and transparent and honest discussion about what is certainly a complex social issue. These are not easy discussions to have, but that's how you know they're important. And the Chamber is committed to ensuring that all of our stakeholders have the relevant information they need to make the best decisions and to stay informed. We are, of course, especially eager to acknowledge that we are on traditional Treaty 6 lands. These are lands where Indigenous footsteps from those that have come before us have tread for centuries. And I am both humbled and privileged to be meeting with all of you here today in this special place. Last time I'd mentioned that we'd have this video available to everyone, hopefully before Scott Kaiba did, but we've learned that nobody beat Scott Kaiba to the YouTube. So I'm happy to say tonight we're trying a new track. We're going to announce a digital partnership with Mr. Kaiba right now. You'll find this video on his YouTube channel, I'm sure, just as soon as it ends. And in exchange, we're hoping to get a few of his famous chicken hats. We do want to thank Scott in earnest for helping us get this information out to everyone, though. Honestly, I know how much time and effort he puts into getting information available to Wetaskiwin residents, and we're grateful for it. Of course, we're eager to answer any questions you might have, so if you have any questions for us, put them in the chat below. We will be screening questions for applicability, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can tonight. We have a few guest speakers with us tonight. We're, of course, pleased to have Wetaskiwin's General Manager of Community and Protective Services, Mr. Paul Edgington. We also have Misty Griffith, who is Executive Director of Family and Community Support Services for the city. And of course, we're happy to see Mayor Tyler Gandam is with us this evening as well. I was actually talking with Mayor Gandam a little earlier about what his future plans were for Wetaskiwin, and he told me that he's especially worried about men's mental health as we come out of this pandemic. And so he was thinking of passing a law that said if you were a male in Wetaskiwin, you would have to have lunch with your best friend at least once a week. Well, it's not a law exactly. It's more of a mandate. That I know what you're thinking, Mayor Gandam. I did write that while looking out the window this afternoon. All joking aside, though, Mayor Gandam has been tirelessly working to address issues that affect all the Wetaskiwin residents. At the Chamber, we've always appreciated his willingness to talk with us at any time. Sometimes we just text him at 2 in the morning just to see if he'll respond. And we appreciate his vision for making Wetaskiwin inclusive and productive for everyone. So please, the floor is yours, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Are we on for lunch again for tomorrow?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I would certainly participate in that mandate.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. I believe we've learned a lot these past few years, both as a municipal organization and a community, about the struggles and needs of our vulnerable humans. One lesson learned is the importance of early and consistent communication with everyone impacted by these issues. I want to thank the Chamber for assisting us with this by hosting these regular community updates, especially considering the impact that the shelters had on the downtown business community and those accessing services in our downtown core. These conversations aren't always easy to have, but they are crucial to the development of a solution which is acceptable to everyone who lives or works in Wetaskiwin. Thank you again for taking the time out of your day to hear how the city and partner agencies are moving forward for a shared solution.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Lunch tomorrow is on you, I think. I think it's your turn to buy. And now it's my pleasure to bring back to our basement studio, Mr. Paul Edgington. This isn't Mr. Edgington's first time on the show. He's a regular guest of ours, and we always appreciate his insight. We're glad to have you with us tonight, Paul. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us, Richard. Pleasure to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to present this evening. Can I take it away?
Absolutely.
I thought there might be some more coming. Okay, all right. Hello, folks. Good evening. As Richard mentioned, my name is Paul Edgington, General Manager of Community and Protective Services. Do a bit of a presentation, so I think I'm going to try to share my screen. And let me go into it. Oops. and change that to that. So Richard, can you just see my slides or do you see my notes as well?
It looks perfect to me, Paul.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, folks, and good evening, and everyone. And thank you once again to the Chamber for hosting this event, an opportunity to inform and discuss how the City of Wetaskiwin is moving forward in response to the closure of the 24/7 Integrated Response Hub in the community. We have a bit of an agenda here this evening. We've structured our presentation this evening to provide some history and some lessons learned on how the city has, in the past, responded to providing supports to our vulnerable population. It will be very important to review our history and understand our context to better understand why the city is pursuing a regional approach to community safety and well-being. During our presentation, we will provide an overview of what the current landscape, or what I term an ecosystem, might look like for Wetaskiwin, and what it might look like in the future if we can commit to working together. We will provide an update on all of the work the city is doing to build relationships within our community, across our region, and other levels of government. And we will conclude our presentation this evening with a short video that summarizes this collaborative approach to addressing homelessness in our community, and a call to action and more information on how you can get involved. As Richard mentioned, Misty Griffith, Executive Director for the Wetaskiwin FCSS, is also here this evening to lend some insight into the importance of this collaborative approach, as well as to provide an update on some of the changes happening with Wetaskiwin FCSS here in the community. At the end, there will be an opportunity for discussion at the end, and our team will do our best to answer any questions that you might have this evening as we get going. And so where do we begin? I'd like to take some time to talk about understanding homelessness in the city of Wetaskiwin. Now, the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness describes homelessness as a situation of an individual, family, or community without stable, safe, permanent, appropriate housing, or the immediate prospect, means, and ability of acquiring it. And in their definition, they have 4 different types of homelessness. So the first is unsheltered. That is defined as absolutely homeless and living on the streets or in places not intended for human habituation or habitation. We see that in the many tent cities popping up in and around Wetaskiwin. We've seen that on the streets of Wetaskiwin. That is something that I think this community, driving around or walking around, we've seen unsheltered homeless in our community. We have emergency sheltered. That is those staying in overnight shelters for people who are homeless, as well as shelters for those impacted by family violence. So in our community, that looks like those that have accessed the winter emergency shelter for the past few years, or those that are currently accessing the 24/7 Integrated Response Hub, which is scheduled to close on August the 4th. They define provisionally accommodated, those whose accommodation is temporary or lacks security of tenure, and those that are at risk of homelessness, people who are not homeless but whose current economic and or housing situation is precarious or does not meet public health and safety standards. So it should be noted that for many people, homelessness is not a static state, but rather a fluid experience where one's shelter circumstance and options may shift and change quite dramatically and with frequency. And our community does not currently understand what our full spectrum, as defined by this Canadian Observatory on Homelessness, based off the definitions I've just provided. We do not really understand what that looks like. Over the years, we have received different statistics and data from various groups in our vulnerable population. These statistics have generally focused on our unsheltered population, but it doesn't inform us of what the full spectrum really looks like in our community. The 2019 Community Social Needs Assessment, also known locally as the Nichols Report, the Wetaskiwin RCMP, and the Camrose Open Door have all provided statistics in various forms to help us inform us. But we need to work with more community partners to validate this data and to gain a better understanding of the magnitude of our homeless population in our community. Over the years, we've been so focused on reactively responding to managing crisis related to our vulnerable population that we have lost sight of how we can respond to dealing with these issues in a long-term and sustainable way. We need to step back, widen our lens, and ensure that we are inclusive and intentional in our approach so that nobody in our community gets left behind. Now that we've talked a little bit about understanding the homeless situation, I want to talk a little bit more about the history of homelessness and the history of the city in responding to the needs of our vulnerable in our community. We cannot move forward together as a community unless we reflect on our history and how we have attempted to provide supports to our vulnerable population in the past. So in 2018, our community started to have discussions related to tackling the homelessness issue when 2 skate shacks that were provided by the city to keep our vulnerable shelter during the summer months burned to the ground. That caught national news attention, and that winter, the city opened an emergency warming shelter and staffed it with city volunteers. In late 2019, 2020, the city again opened the emergency warming shelter, but this time operated it by the Lighthouse Church. And in November of 2020, the Camrose Open Door opened a 24/7 integrated support hub and provided supports from the Civic Building downtown. And so over those past 3 years, we have learned a lot as a community from each of these attempts. None of these previous attempts, including the 24/7 integrated support hub, were good enough. These solutions impacted the entire community in the following way. These solutions negatively impacted our community's overall sense of safety. These solutions alienated members of our own community. These solutions negatively impacted downtown businesses. These solutions divided our community and created an inability to identify a sustainable long-term solution. And these solutions did not proactively engage the downtown business community and broader region that we live in. So let us be clear. We can see that these types of supports do provide benefit to our vulnerable population, and that in the absence of an emergency shelter or a 24/7 integrated response hub, that we have a gap in our community. We acknowledge this and understand that we need to work together to figure this out, have some frank discussions in a respectful manner, and move forward together. We've learned a lot over the past 3 years, and this past year specifically, while providing both benefits and challenges for our vulnerable population, has taught us 3 major lessons if we could sum it up. The first is that our overall approach to community engagement and dialogue was not good enough. We heard that loud and clear. We need to be better and more proactive in the future. Our continual need to focus more on a reactive approach to addressing our challenges has also led to the demise of each of our previous solutions in 2018, 2019, and the most recent one with the 24/7 integrated support hub in 2020-21. The second is that we need to start focusing on long-term outcomes if we hope to have any sustainable success in our community. Reacting to a crisis as it emerges does not allow us the time to get to know each other, does not allow us the time to build trust and work together to solve this problem. It actually prevents us from focusing on long-term solutions. And thirdly, our previous attempts to address these challenges has been very city-focused. And what I mean by that is that we have not worked in partnership enough with Wetaskiwin County, Samson Cree Nation, Ermineskin Cree Nation, Louisville Cree Nation, and Montana Cree Nation. These challenges do not stop at our borders, and we need to acknowledge that and start focusing on our broader region to help address the problem. And perhaps working together regionally, uncover opportunities that we wouldn't have been able to pursue by ourselves. And so I'm gonna, those that have gotten to know me, I'm a man of metaphor, so I do apologize. But our community finds herself in an uncomfortable situation. We know that we have an issue with homelessness in our community. We know that our vulnerable population need better access to supports for mental health and addictions. And we know that our community has become increasingly divided on how we should move forward and start to really address these issues for the long term. How do we unite and move forward in the face of all this? And in the face of all this, how do we do this together? In our youth, or when we're in grade school, we are introduced to the concept of an ecosystem. An ecosystem, for those that may have departed to grade school many moons ago, I'm not sure which grade they teach this in, but as I had to look it up on Wikipedia, I thought I might provide a definition. They define it as a system that contains all organisms and the physical environment with which they interact. So going throughout this journey, in my role with the city, I've always found it helpful to address these issues related to our vulnerable population. I find it helpful to think about our community as one big giant ecosystem. The physical environment with which we interact is the city of Wetaskiwin, Wetaskiwin County, and the Samson, Ermineskin, Louisville, and Montana Cree Nations. The organisms in this metaphor are all the stakeholders in our communities. the residents, businesses, schools, hospitals, social agencies, and municipalities in the region. So mature ecosystems, such as this beautiful rainforest pictured in the slide, are self-sustaining. That is, they look after themselves and they are sustainable over the long term because of the deep roots, connections, and sustaining life sources that have been in place for hundreds of years and that allow them to thrive on their own. In our ecosystem in Wetaskiwin, in the context of how we come together to address this issue, it is still in its infancy and it needs some nurturing. We need to spend time creating the foundations and structures to ensure that our community is able to start to get to know each other, that we need to start building relationships, establishing trust, and start discussing these complex issues in a way that respects differing views or opinions in our community. We cannot thrive until all of us come together as a community, and that means all of us. In 2021, our administration started to put some of these structures in place, and I wanted to introduce each one to you and acknowledge that each of these structures that I'm about to present are intended to work together in a collaborative ecosystem, so to speak, to start addressing these issues over the long term together. So the first I'd like to present this evening, and that we've heard before at the last chamber events, the Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee. The entire ecosystem, so to speak, is overseen and governed by a regional Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee that includes elected officials and decision makers from across our region, including the City of Wetaskiwin, Wetaskiwin County, and the 4 Cree Nations, including Samson, Ermineskin, Louisbourg, and Montana. This committee held their initial meeting on June 30th and is intended to think long-term and support the entire ecosystem in removing roadblocks or challenges as they appear to ensure that we are able to respond to emerging situations more proactively and in a more coordinated fashion. This committee will meet regularly, and a second meeting is in the process of already being scheduled. However, our initial progress is expected to be slow due to unavailability of staff to attend throughout our summer months. But the committee will start the process of getting up to speed on our pilot project, which we're currently working on and overseen by the Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention and Reach Edmonton, and will discuss emerging issues as required. The committee will receive training on the methodology that will help guide the development of a strategy for the community, and these dates are expected to be scheduled for September and will be offered to all members that have not already taken the training. By the end of this year, the hopes is that the committee should be ready to start development of a long-term strategy for the overall community safety and well-being of our communities. The strategy is intended to look long-term, think 20 years out. How does our community look different? And these longer-term outcomes are expected to guide the community's overall response and how we address complex social challenges in our community moving forward. I feel like this is a big milestone, and I want to recognize the members of this committee that have dedicated their time to come together, which include both elected officials and decision makers from their respective organization. So firstly, Allison Adamsbull, an administrator with Louisbourg Tribe and also co-chair of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee. Dean Billingsley, councillor with the City of Wetaskiwin. Jeff Chipley, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer with the County of Wetaskiwin. Inspector Keith Durant with the Wetaskiwin RCMP. Myself, Paul Edgington, General Manager of Community and Protective Services with the City of Wetaskiwin. Ran Good, our Communications Manager with the City of Wetaskiwin. Misty Griffith, Executive Director of Wetaskiwin FCSS and also co-chair of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee. Gina Longjohn, the Director of Emergency Management and Chief Financial Officer from Montana First Nation. Heather Pratt, our Enforcement Services Administrator and Watch Clerk with the City of Wetaskiwin. Lynn Ware, Board Chair and Trustee with the Wetaskiwin Regional Public Schools. And Dale White, Councillor with the County of Wetaskiwin. And I also recognize we're missing a representative here from Alberta Health Services. I apologize for not including that name here on the slide. We also have a representative from Alberta Health Services, and they're also included on these conversations as well. The second part of our ecosystem, the second vital structure of our ecosystem that has been put in place is the Guiding Coalition of Homelessness. Administration is attending these meetings, and we will look to the coalition to advise on issues related to homelessness in the future. This includes better understanding of what is the current state of homelessness, where are we on that spectrum, and what numbers are we dealing with in the community. what supports and solutions that we are going to provide to the vulnerable population this fall and winter. We want to hear from the coalition. And how are we going to start working together as a community to start addressing these issues in the long term? This committee is overseen by Wetaskiwin FCSS and is a grassroots initiative. I'd like to ask Misty Griffith, who's on the call, just to provide an overview of the coalition and speak to the importance, if you might, Misty.
I will. So as Paul said, I'm Misty Griffith. I'm the Executive Director for City of Wetaskiwin Family and Community Support Services. I began working for FCSS in mid-March of 2021. So I know many of you have seen me post about the initiative on different social media platforms, as well as post on the chamber discussions at times. We are very new. We've only had 2 meetings. So we are very excited to revive this initiative. FCSS staff have put in countless hours researching and gathering information on how to have a successful homeless strategy in our community. We've been gathering research both federally and provincially of best practices, and everything we read had 2 common themes. Number 1 was ongoing community engagement throughout the process, including once in place, to provide buy-in and community acceptance and embrace the move to long-term homeless strategies. The second was gathering relevant, factual, and current data to not only secure grant funding, but to put in place the proper strategies and supports to address our community needs. We have approximately at this time 26 members, both from organizations and agencies, but also community individuals representing regional focus as well, so not just city. We have as a coalition, we recognize that poverty is widespread in our community, and our hub provides support for just a fraction of the population that may need these supports. This is not due to any fault of any one service. There are so many variables that cause individuals to not receive the supports they need. Everything from not feeling they qualify for support, not knowing how to access, not being able to access the support without help, or not wanting the support. We also agree that we need to change the name of our coalition because our coalition in general feels that homeless is not exactly accurate. We have many individuals and families that may not have a home or on the verge of losing everything, but still have a place to stay. This does not mean that they're doing well, and we want that name to encompass this. So we're currently working on the name change. Our first meeting, we worked together to come up with key areas to focus on. So one of the main focus area for us is action. So a lot of committees meet and talk and get nothing done, especially the bigger the committee, the more discussion, and then not enough time to do the action. So our group is large. It's a large, diverse group with representation from several sectors of the community. Committed to the coalition, and its goals will be key. Collaboration and cooperation amongst a variety of organizations, individuals, and likely levels of government will help us all work smarter and not harder. We always find that there's a lot of community agencies and organizations and individuals and groups in our community that are doing amazing work, but none of us know what's really happening, and we don't collaborate enough together. And so we're doing tons of stuff, but nobody's talking, and we actually end up doing the same thing that other people are doing. So we're finding bigger gaps because of that. So if we work together, we'll actually close those gaps more. There is no room for independent agendas looking to be fulfilled within the coalition. We all have, especially organizations, we have mandates that we follow, but we're coming in as a group looking to find how do we find these long-term solutions working together. We need a solution-focused, problem-solving approach that is action-oriented. Issues need to be explored from all sides, and then a plan will be enacted to address the aspects of issues within our control. Effective, positive communication that educates the public on homelessness and poverty is an area that we found was lacking in the last, I guess, over the years. So we need to start bringing that to light and start engaging our community. A strategy to ensure all community members have equitable access to the necessities of life. Some of the target areas of need that were identified by the group and are not limited, but this is just a few areas. Access to free or low cost, high quality ongoing counseling, access to free or low cost, high quality ongoing addiction treatment, a comprehensive referral system that includes either virtual options or transportation options for out of town appointments, access to free or low cost, high quality ongoing help with financial matters, including but not limited to applications of appropriate income support programs, applications for proper identification to access these programs, banking assistance, smart shopping, budgeting, and help setting up utilities, lobbying for livable amounts for varied income support programs, developing programs to address life skill development at any age or stage of life, developing community strategies and or programs to address the root cause of homelessness and poverty, such as racism or colonial history, individual and intergenerational trauma. One of the big areas that we found were lacking after watching what all the hub services and all the great work that they did with their clients was there's nowhere to go from the shelter. So there's no transitional housing. That is a big gap. So often the affordable housing that there is in town, it's not safe, or it's back to, they move back to the situation that they had left and the reasoning for their leaving. So that is a big gap. We also found housing specific to youth, access to food supports, services that respect cultural differences and family traditions, and services offered that support diversity and inclusion. So to address these needs and areas of concern, we'll be forming subcommittees that will break off and find community partners, agencies, government officials to support the work. So this means that much of the work will not be done at our coalition meeting, but rather in the subcommittees. This allows us to do more and be more effective. It also allows people to work in the areas that they feel they have a strong interest in, and maybe ways of reaching out to the community partners that need to be part of those conversations. The larger coalition meetings will be to update, keep committees accountable and moving forward, bringing forward concerns and target areas of need, and to work as a group when subcommittees need further assistance, and also to go back to the safety and well-being committee to keep them informed of what's happening. This is going to be challenging, and we acknowledge it won't be easy. We need to work together as a community to bring about change, and change is hard. We also recognize that we all need to validate and hear both sides of the spectrum regarding homelessness in our community. This is hard at times when we all have invested interests. This committee is working to be non-biased and find ways to bring people together for the greater need. Although we recognize the urgency of the hub closure, we also know we can't rush steps for quick fixes. We need to be strategic to look at long-term outcomes, as Paul had mentioned, and how do we bring in long-term solutions. We took a step back to assess what is it we're trying to do as a coalition. And we recognize we have many steps to address that were possibly missed the first time around due to the urgency to get the shelter in place, but also how busy the hub services became due to the need. This is not a bad thing. The hub has opened our eyes and allowed us to see what supports are missing in the process. For example, transitional housing and assisted living. How the open door model brings together service providers working to support individuals with complex needs is working, and we need this model in more areas of our city. This shows that this service is needed and utilized. Due to the success of the hub services and the increased clients they serve, they need to focus on the critical needs of the hub. Community engagement fell through the cracks due to many reasons. This model is successful. However, what we are seeing is that this model needs to be a collaborative community effort. Our hope is that this coalition will be able to fill in those gaps. Everyone has a piece of the puzzle and is working collaboratively to address concerns quickly. We have, for example, we have a subcommittee working on engaging the business community in the works now. We as a coalition have reached out to the hub to find out ways to support the transition of the closure and find ways to support our vulnerable. We need more subcommittee volunteers to be part of this process to move forward. And what we do know is that this is no longer a city-only approach, as Paul had mentioned. We need to do this as a regional approach. We have our next meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. and we'll be looking at subcommittees to look at what to do for the winter months for our homeless once the shelter closes. So if you would like to join the coalition, I'll put my email in the chat box for you. If there's a particular targeted subcommittee that you would like to be part of, make sure to list this in the email. Some of the volunteers we're needing are for social media campaigning, educating on homelessness and the coalition. So if you are good with social media, please email me. We need some help with that. Community education and discussions, data and research collection, and looking into affordable housing, transitional housing. And I'll turn it back to Paul.
Thanks, Misty. As I opened at the beginning, our city administration is attending these meetings, and we are looking to the Guiding Coalition of Homelessness to advise our administration and council on what are the next steps. And so, in the slide here, we talk about needing to better understand what the current state of homelessness is in the community and help validate the data that's been provided to us over the past 3 years. We need to start to better understand as the city administration and council as to what are we going to start doing in regards to the vulnerable population this fall, winter, when the temperatures start to drop. We also need to start talking about more long-term solutions. Misty mentions a few, transitional housing, that sort of thing. And so I would encourage you folks, if on the call here today, if this sounds like something, if you've been looking for an opportunity to get involved, this is a great opportunity. Thanks, Misty, for providing that perspective. As I proceed here, the third part of our ecosystem is our Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. So those of you that don't know much about the task force, it serves as a forum of discussion to develop and implement initiatives to drive awareness and education on creating a welcoming and inclusive community for all, regardless of their race, ethnicity, ability, sexual orientation, age, income level, or language. The task force has been meeting monthly since the spring, and recently they met to review the terms of reference and identify a co-chair to ensure sustainability for leading and facilitating those discussions moving forward. In our administration's regular meetings with the 4 Cree Nations, we've actually been able to identify a number of opportunities for their staff to get more involved with members of our community to start addressing issues that our Indigenous population face in our community. This task force, while not yet officially overseen by the Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee, plays a large part of overcoming some of the complex social challenges that we face in our community by fostering discussions aimed at driving awareness and education on a welcoming and inclusive community. And lastly, we are creating structures to better involve the community and our partners in how we approach emergency planning. Since December 2020, our administration has responded to 2 different emergencies pertaining to our vulnerable population specifically. First is the assisted isolation site that was opened on December 24th with support from the Open Door to respond to the COVID outbreak at the 24/7 Integrated Support Hub. The second and most recent was the cooling station that was opened in early July to respond to the heat wave with support from Red Cross as temperatures soared to the high 30s in Wetaskiwin. In all of these cases, the city was either supported by the Open Door, Wetaskiwin FCSS, and the Red Cross to respond to these events. And the fact of the matter is we need to be more proactive, and we need to be working with more than just 3 community partners. Last week, the mayor and I attended a debrief with our staff and members of AHS and the PCN to debrief how the ACES site went. During that meeting, both AHS and the Primary Care Network echoed the importance of working together in a more formal manner to respond to these types of emergencies in the future. I just wanted to acknowledge the support of both AHS and the PCN in working with the city to address these issues, and that we recognize the importance of this partnership moving forward to ensure our vulnerable population receive the supports required during times of crisis. Our staff will be developing an MOU with these agencies to ensure that we are better able to proactively respond to these emergencies as they appear. These relationships between the city and our emergency providers and other agencies in our community are critical to ensure we are able to provide supports that are required for the vulnerable population in our community. So today, if I was to describe this slide in bubbles, our ecosystem can be described as still in its infancy. And I did apologize for the metaphors before, but like a young garden that needs tending on a regular basis. So without attention, the garden would be unable to withstand droughts, pests, or extreme temperatures, and would eventually become overgrown and ineffective and unable to produce either flowers, fruit, or vegetables. And our ecosystem in Wetaskiwin requires the same level of attention and nurturing. For our ecosystem to be effective, we need the right people at the right tables to discuss issues that require attention, both today, in the short term, and tomorrow in the long term. To be effective, each of these committees needs to be better linked and connected to ensure that we tackle complex issues, such as homelessness, from multiple angles. Over time, our ecosystem will grow and evolve and will be able to tackle more complex problems. The relationships that we would have built and the trust that we would have earned together over time as a community would be intact, it would be strong, and we would be better able to pursue solutions to some of our challenges that are out of reach for us today. Today, we are focusing exclusively on homelessness and the crisis that we face. But we need to think much broader. Tomorrow, we hope to foster discussions around mental health and addictions, food security, housing, and crime as well, to start addressing these complex issues from multiple angles over the long term. An essential piece that we have touched on throughout the presentation, but is critical to moving forward as a community and a region, is building trust and forming lasting relationships in our community and the region. Our administration is dedicated to building relationships through regular discussions and partnerships with Wetaskiwin County, the 4 Cree nations, which include Samson, Ermineskin, Louisville, and Montana. Our administration has recently shown our commitment to the work required to rededicate the Peace Cairn, as well as holding monthly meetings with each of these respective Cree nations. We are building relationships with staff in the government of Alberta. Within the RCMP, we are involved in several pilot projects aimed at supporting the community and addressing these complex issues. We are building stronger relationships with emergency service providers such as AHS, the PCN, and the Red Cross. We attend Wetaskiwin SCSS interagency regularly and are always trying to build better relationships with our community and social agencies. Our administration will continue to engage and listen to our community stakeholders as well, including both residents and local businesses, to ensure that we are listening to their perspectives, and we will build better trust with both businesses and residents over time. We do have a short video that I think provides a really good summary of the concepts we've described today, as well as to hear from our city manager and just to hear about the importance of all of this and how it all comes together.
Our community really together and say we have a common we have to be prepared to have those difficult conversations with each other. And we have to be real with each other about the problems that we're having.
Oh, sorry, folks. We understand there remains a lot of frustration in the community and that we don't have all the answers right now. We acknowledge that the work we have done to date is not good enough and we have a lot more work to do. And we are committed to doing this work and we need to work together. We have an opportunity to transform our feelings of frustration and powerlessness right now into transformative action. So I call upon all of those in the community, upon all of those watching this presentation right now, to visit our website or reach out to our staff directly to get involved. We need all of those that are willing to be part of the solution to move this important work forward. I'd like to thank you for your time this evening and thank you for the Chamber for an opportunity to present on this important work. I just want to note on the slide that the What If Wetaskiwin website is up and operational as of today. So that would be your best place to go for up to date news on the situation as it evolves. And before we conclude, I'd like to open it and open up to questions. I'd like to hand the presentation over to Misty Griffith from Wetaskiwin FCSS, who's going to share some important and exciting information on behalf of Wetaskiwin FCSS. Misty?
Okay, I'm back. So I just wanted to kind of give you all an update. There's been a lot of changes with FCSS. In 2020, FCSS moved from a city department to a nonprofit operating under a governing board. In July 2020, FCSS received our federal certificate of incorporation under Canada Not-for-Profit Corporation Act. January 2021, we received our provincial certificate of incorporation under the government of Alberta. FCSS has experienced a complete staff turnover since July 2020, so we are slowly getting back to operational. It's been a long, busy journey trying to do this. So I'm happy that everybody's been so patient with us, and soon we will be fully operational. Currently, we just filled a vacant position, and this person will join us next week. The board is also in the process of adding additional volunteers. These volunteers are hoping to expand their board so that they can work on policies, procedures, and other things that we need to do moving to a governing board. We will be reviewing all of our past programs, events, and initiatives to determine what changes need to be made and what programs are still vital to our community. There was a strong focus on seniors in the past. However, we still will be doing senior programming. However, we will be changing to be more inclusive and broad to allow us to address target areas of need for prevention. And this will include, like I said, our senior programming, but won't be our complete focus. One of our biggest exciting news is that we've moved to a new location, which is better suited for our FCS needs. The new location will be announced later in August, just because we are currently unpacking and settling into this new space, and it's a bit of a disaster. So I'm hoping that in the next couple of weeks we'll be completely organized and ready to go. So we are going to keep that location a surprise to the public until we are ready for our grand opening. That will be announced in August, end of August or early September. So please follow us on Facebook and keep a lookout throughout the city for dates, times, and activities that will take place for the grand opening. So some of the things that we've been doing, though, while we've been changing and going through all these changes, we have been doing programming and initiatives through this process. So one is to continue the interagencies. This has been taking place every month, with the exception of July and August. Every meeting starts with a presentation from an organization or agency to give us a glimpse into what services they provide, how to access and answer questions. We will be opening this up to community groups as well once we kind of get more settled into this process. We have a roundtable to discuss what is new with programs and upcoming events. We also started a newsletter that will go out monthly with all the new events and activities, and we released our first one in June, and we're hoping to be more consistent and have monthly newsletters starting in September, and these will be available to the public. The tax program. This program allows us to work with volunteers to offer free assistance with tax returns for individuals, seniors, and families with modest income and simple tax situations. This year, we partnered with the Hub to work with clients that they were servicing to file their taxes and receive their GST and other returns. Although this program generally ends in April, our volunteer, who has been amazing, I don't know what we would do without him, he stayed on to help complete a few that had not filed for many years, and is continuing to do that throughout the summer as well. We will continue this program in the future, but are looking for more volunteers to help us assist with this. So if you have any background in accounting or doing taxes, please reach out. We do need more volunteers for this. We would like to serve more in the community. It's really hard when we only have one or two. Community presentations. So FCSS is currently working to bring in Dr. Jody Carrington to work with a couple of our committees and FCSS board, and to provide a community evening presentation that will be available to everyone that wants to be part of that. We are very excited to bring her to our community. The presentation will be centered on trauma, and there will be community resource tables at the event. And we had a date, but now there's a conflict. So we're hoping to have Jody come in, Dr. Jody Carrington come in around mid-September. So we'll be posting the dates and time and ticket sales, hopefully in the next week or so. Asset mapping. We are currently taking training through the Tamarack Institute to do an asset mapping initiative for our city. We are looking for volunteers to be part of this initiative to gather information and data. The training is free if you're part of our asset mapping committee. So if you are interested in this kind of thing, I highly encourage you to join us. We went with this company due to the training that they offer individuals in our community, so we can continue to update and change data year to year as needed. The asset mapping collects assets in a variety of areas. So one would be assets that are individuals, so what individuals are doing for our community and what they offer, volunteers in the community, agencies and organizations, environment, so what kind of landscape do we have? Do we have a lot of parks? Is it more city-based that you don't have as many opportunities? So how can you work with that? Cultural, so what kind of cultural aspects do we have in our community? And climate, so what is our weather patterns in our community? If we have longer winters, maybe we need to adjust and do more activities that are part of those kind of weather patterns and climate. This will allow us to find all the amazing assets in our city to help plan, organize, and collaborate. And we are very excited to begin this process, as the data will also help support future plans for different initiatives, including the Guiding Coalition on Homelessness. We'll also be working with the city as part of this asset mapping. Grant funding. So FCSS has secured a number of grants this past year. Two in particular are helping our vulnerable individuals and families. So the Social Service COVID grant provided gift cards for necessity of life and food, domestic abuse safety backpacks, outreach supplies such as water, Gatorade, and gift cards that the CPOs handed out. We recently got additional funding for this particular grant and have partnered with No Frills here in the city to have identified organizations purchase necessity of life and food that they feel is needed for their clients accessing them. A big shout out to No Frills for working with FCSS to set this up. It's been a lot of work on their end, and they have been amazing to help us out. We also will be purchasing additional domestic abuse backpacks and community education programs. Open Door is receiving a large part of this grant funding. Mental health and addiction COVID-19 community grant. So this grant is fully supporting the Open Door. It will continue as long as the Open Door is operational in Wetaskiwin, providing services as outlined in the grant. FCSS also provides grant funding through our funds to community organizations. Three had applied this year and will and have received their funding. And the way they are chosen is they apply. Different community organizations apply for grant funding through our FCSS, and we choose them based on the criteria and mandate to see if it fits what we're looking like, what our parameters are for funding. So that'll be going out again for next year. So keep your eyes out on that. We'll post it on social media and probably in the paper in other areas so that people can apply for that funding, or organizations and groups can apply for that funding. And that's all I have. So if you would like to volunteer, again, use the FCSS email that I posted. We're always looking for volunteers for different programs. We also find volunteers for other community organizations and programs that are happening in events. So if you're interested in anything volunteer-wise, please reach out again to me and I will put your name forward. Thank you.
And Richard, before we send it back to you, I just want to, I heard that you guys couldn't hear this audio on that video when I shared it, so my apologies, but it will be up. It is live right now on the What If Wetaskiwin website. So for those of you that wanted to go and check that out, you just go visit the What If Wetaskiwin website. You should be able to find a copy of it.
Excellent, Paul. And I would say that What If Wetaskiwin website is brilliant. I've been on there quite a few times. It's nice to have all of the public engagement for a municipality in one place. I think it's a brilliant idea. Are you ready for the question and answer portion, or do you have a few more words?
No, I just, thank you so much to Jennifer and Richard and your team for putting this on. Really do appreciate it. And no, I think the fun part is the questions and answers. So that's what we're here for.
All right, we'll try to work from a more immediate time frame and then start to look a little long term. So a few of the questions that we've had both emailed to us earlier and from the chat is, what is the city expecting when the hub closes its physical location when the lease expires? Are you putting in some kind of contingency planning for that? What is the city expecting that week looks like?
So I mean, our understanding of the situation is that the hub will be transitioning to mobile supports, I believe, on August 4th. I know Jessica's got a presentation, or the executive director of the Open Door has a presentation tomorrow to speak more to that. But they will be closing the doors on August 4th to the vulnerable population. The city has no plans as far as opening another shelter or any other supports in this time. Our FCSS and Wetaskiwin FCSS and our bylaw enforcement do provide outreach as needed, as well in partnership with the RCMP. And our understanding is that the Open Door will be looking to transition to mobile support. So in regards to what that looks like, I'll leave that for the Open Doors presentation tomorrow. But as far as any solutions or next steps, we would be looking to the Guiding Coalition of Homelessness and all those individuals for those discussions to inform us on what we do next.
Yeah, and you're 100% correct, Paul. The hub is having an information session with the chamber tomorrow at noon. You can find information about that on our website. What's going to happen, I guess, in the next sort of midterm then? So, it's hard to think about today when we're in the smoke and the heat, but winter is coming. What is the city's plan for when the cold weather hits? Will the hub continue to just operate in sort of a mobile position, or is there some thought going on to housing people over the course of the winter?
I can't speak at all to what the Open Doors plans might be with their solution. Can speak to the city. I think Misty kind of spoke to the Guiding Coalition of Homelessness a little bit. We are looking for two different subcommittees to help us in the short term. One, to help us better understand what does the spectrum of homelessness look like in Wetaskiwin. We've received varying levels of data from the Open Door, RCMP, the Nichols report from 2018. We need to validate that, working with other social agencies to get better understand what our spectrum of homelessness looks like in our community. That's first and foremost, just to bring us all into this somewhat a shared context. The second piece is we do know the winter months are coming. We do know that it's going to get colder, and we would be looking for a subcommittee of interested individuals and service providers, social agencies, to work together to inform us and to advise us on what we should do. I think the last 3 years, and as I've mentioned before, we've always been pretty reactive in addressing these situations, and we do find ourselves in a bit more of a reactive situation this time as well. And this time we're reaching out to the community, though, to help us find the solution. There's a multitude of varying level things we could recommend to our council. We need to hear from people that are very connected with the vulnerable population, very connected to the work that they do in the community, and listen to them to advise us and work together on that solution.
And how do businesses get involved, Paul, in that engagement portion? What's the best way if they don't have the time to volunteer on the committee? And we'll talk about the subcommittees here again in a minute. But if I'm a business owner and I have some engagement, what's the best way for me to share my feedback or offer my solutions?
Yeah, we have two very brilliant economic development staff that I know have very good relationships with the chamber, with you and Jennifer, and I know they've got really good relationships with local businesses. So either Candace Coughlin or Raylan Coffee, please reach out to them directly, and they'll ensure that feedback funnels right to us here at the city. And if they want to get involved on the Guiding Coalition of Homelessness, I'm sure that Misty would be very happy to have them as well.
And again, FCSS is looking for volunteers for the subcommittees. There's the Affordable Transitional Housing Committee, the Social Media Campaign Committee, the Community Education and Engagement Committee, the Data and Research Collection, and the Winter Homeless Shelter Committee. Are there opportunities for businesses to volunteer on those committees and even maybe sit on the overarching Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee?
For sure, on the Homeless Coalition, we're actually one of the other subcommittees that are working right now are it's a community engagement downtown sharing circle with the business community, so that the plans are in the works for that. There was a little bit of a delay with the residential school recent news stuff that's been coming out, so we put it on hold a little bit, but it will be happening hopefully in the near future once we kind of get back into the groove of things. So that is in the plan, that is in the works, and that community engagement sharing circle is to have open discussions, have the business community be able to open and have open dialogue, and to move forward and find solutions to work together.
Richard, just to speak to the opportunity on the Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee, we've structured that intentionally to include strictly either only elected officials or decision makers from respective municipal organizations or social agencies. We're trying to keep that table pretty limited as we look at it as a sort of a governing board for all of this work moving forward. That being said, I do recognize that we need to do a better job of listening to our businesses, listening to our residents, and you can be assured that that committee will be reaching out to the community as required through various different types of engagement processes moving forward.
And I think you knew this question was coming, especially in terms of municipal government. I think we can thank Parks and Recreation for ruining municipal governance for all of us. But there's a question in the chat about committees and more committees. And is there any concern that having all these different committees is going to create some overlap or some duplication, or maybe potentially slow down the process of moving towards a goal?
So, and a great part, right? Because I as much as I work in local government, I really don't like bureaucracy, because it takes us sometimes away from action. And you heard from Misty say action is key. When we brought the Guiding Coalition members together, they said to us, we want to get going and cracking on solutions right away. But we also need to recognize that we haven't taken the time to build relationships, to build trust. We recognize as an administration that it's a divided community right now. Whether or not you support the hub or not, the community is very, very divided, and we need to slow it down a little bit and take the time to build those relationships and sit at those tables and have conversation and to have differing levels of opinion where we can do so in a respectful manner and to find shared solutions through that dialogue. While I say that, while I understand that sounds extremely bureaucratic and like it's going to take forever to get work done, we also understand that action is paramount. And so through the subcommittees, I think the way it's been structured, we will be ensuring that we move forward on action. The two pieces I spoke to, understanding what a spectrum of homelessness is, and the fact that we have an impending crisis coming upon us in this fall, winter, with no emergency shelter in place in our community. And so, I think you can have both, but I do want to suggest that for us to completely throw away the idea of sitting at these tables and just jumping into solutions, that's what got us into the problems we faced for the last 3 years. And so from the city's perspective, we want to ensure that whatever work we're doing together as a community is sustainable, and we're focusing on the long term, while also ensuring that our short-term goals or our short-term crises that we know are coming are dealt with as well. So I hope that answers the question. I see the chat is blowing up a little bit with, it's the bureaucracy, and I get it, but we've got to build relationships, folks, as a community. We've got to come together. And if we can't do that now, it's never going to get fixed. We'll just be cycling through the same issues for the next 20 years.
It's a fine line, isn't it, Paul, between addressing the needs of all the stakeholders and communicating with them and responding quickly to changing conditions and to a short timeline. I definitely feel that that's what the city is struggling to do right now, and I commend the city in making sure that engagement is taking place while trying to find a solution as the clock is ticking, so to speak.
If I may be so direct, the Rock Soup and the Open Door are invited to these tables, and so folks, We all recognize we need to be part of these solutions, but we will not be divided. We will not look to one or two agencies to try to get out of this. We've got to work together. And so we will continue to invite the entire community. If you are interested, please go to Wetaskiwin. Please sign up. Please get involved. Sorry, Richard.
No, not at all. Well said, sir. We've talked about the short term, we've talked a little bit about the medium term, and now let's talk a little bit about long term. You know, one of the issues that the city faced, as you've alluded to, is there was no, I don't want to say plan, but there was no plan in place. And so the civic building was quickly rearranged and utilized as a temporary shelter. It seemed to be the only sort of suitable spot when the crisis hit for that to take place. And so what stops that building from becoming the de facto go-to place this winter, potentially, if another solution isn't found?
Yeah, good question. We've heard from the community loud and clear that that is not an appropriate place for an emergency shelter. We've all recognized, including the Open Door, that that was never intended to be a location for that. And so I would think that by listening to the community and respecting that it has not worked there now for 3 years in a row, that we wouldn't put it back there. But I wouldn't mind if the mayor might be able to kind of jump in on this and speak to why that's not a suitable use.
Over the last 3 years, it's proved that the civic building is an appropriate place to shelter anybody. The first year that we had opened it up, it was in February, it was minus 35. I'd reached out to our city manager and asked if we could open up the bays in the civic building just for a place for people to sleep while we were facing that incredibly cold snap that we had. We ended up getting some funding from the provincial government. It allowed us to buy some cots. I think we bought a washer and a dryer. It turned into a short-term solution while we were going through the winter months. The following year, and it was run by volunteers. There was many staff, city staff, that would go in, work the night shift, and then try to make it through their day with their regular job with the city, trying to maintain the shelter and make sure that the vulnerable population had a place to sleep. So it was very obvious that the city wasn't in a position that they could be running or operating a shelter. So while council still felt that this was important and we saw the need for it in our community, we reached out and found or looked for another organization that could operate the shelter. So we received another provincial grant from the provincial grant. This helped us purchase more supplies, food, and it also paid for an organization to be running the emergency shelter. It was exactly just that. It was an emergency shelter. There was no programming in place. There wasn't the ability to offer any kind of support outside of just a warm place to sleep and a warm meal and possibly a quick shower and a place to clean their clothes. So following that, we've run into much of the same issues in our downtown that we're seeing right now. Public intoxication, open use of alcohol, drugs, harassment of anybody, or not anybody, but patrons downtown, our local businesses. So I called a special council meeting, I believe it was in February of last year, to close the shelter early. Again, because there weren't any supports in place to be looking after the mental health that go along with the addictions, aside from it just being a 12-hour emergency shelter. Following that, again, council recognized the need for having a shelter here. The last place that we wanted to be was in the civic building, and I was very public about that I did not want the shelter to be back in the civic building. I had worked with the Open Door to try to find and secure another location. We had found one, and through call it a misstep through the city, leaving a notice of a land use bylaw change in the door of a building there was not received within the time frame under the MGA for notice to invite them to the public hearing. So would it stand up in court that wouldn't have been a suffice method of delivering the information? I have no idea. It got brought to council for a zoning change, and it was defeated. And it was defeated largely in part because the city was threatened with litigation from a church within the city. And again, I received a ton of pushback when I publicly said that we had a church threatening litigation on a zoning change within the city of Wetaskiwin for the use of the 24/7 integrated resource hub, which would have included the shelter. So I had tons of messages saying, well, the church has supplied food and the church has done this in the community, and that's all well and good, and it's going to take the entire community to have the change that we need to see to get this to move forward. But that doesn't take away from the fact that a church threatened litigation against the city on a zoning change. And I don't think that I can emphasize that enough, that it's really disheartening and super disappointing that that was the driving factor to the zoning change not being done on a potential building. We didn't have an alternative. And it's not even a fact that we don't have the appropriate zoning in the city, because council can change the zoning in the city. You're going to get faced with not my backyard anywhere we go with this. If we've had the suggestions of putting it out in the county, and that's all well and good, but that's not where our vulnerable population are in the community. Having it 5 minutes out of town or 10 minutes out of town with no transportation is no different than somebody who can't get back home and they're stuck in the city and they're using the hub's resources, or when the last 2 winters they were using the emergency shelter for a place to stay. Transportation's an issue. So if we had a suitable location, or if we were able to secure another suitable location, there's absolutely no reason why I wouldn't support a zoning change. Zoning change isn't the issue. Finding a suitable location, having a building available is the problem. The Civic building is not a suitable location, and it wasn't a suitable location last year. It's not a suitable location this year. And the only reason that I voted to close the shelter down early last year is because the programming wasn't in place last year to offer the supports to our vulnerable population. The reason that I didn't support the vote to close the hub down and offer the 90-day lease or termination of the lease is because we didn't have a plan B. The will of council was that we were closing the shelter. That doesn't mean that myself or the city has stopped to try to find another location for the programming that we need in the city. That is absolutely a priority, but it is not the city's only priority. We've got 150 other things that we've got on the go. And I'm not saying that the vulnerable population isn't our priority, but we also need the community to get on board. And that also includes the agencies in town that don't feel like a committee is good enough for them to sit on, that they need to be sitting at the table with the other with the coalition, or sorry, the public coalition. The Community and Safety Committee is based on a governing body of people who are taking information back to their agencies who can make change within the region. So we've got 2 nations on board. We've got the county, we've got the RCMP, we've got the city. Those are the players at the table that we need to be bringing information back to their councils or to their organizations to implement this change, to allocate funding, while we have the coalition supporting that group to share what it is that we need in this community. And we've got agencies like the Open Door and Rock Soup who have a wealth of information and are obviously passionate about the work that they're doing in their community. And if they want to continue to divide what the work is that the city's doing, then that's fine. The city is going to continue to work on our vulnerable population, regardless of what other agencies are doing in the city. And this sounds extremely harsh and extremely cold and probably not very friendly, but I'm really tired of getting the abuse on, especially through social media, that the city isn't doing anything to support our vulnerable population. The only thing the city isn't doing is getting into a social media war with agencies in the community that are pointing out all the missteps or all the things that the city isn't doing without pointing out all of the things that the city continues to do. We've got an amazing administration right now who are working tirelessly to make sure that there's something in place come this winter. And one of the quotes that was put out there by our communications team was from me during our council meeting on Monday, that this isn't a municipal issue. And when I say that, I'm saying that it's not a municipal financial issue. I think the city's gone well above and beyond to make sure that we're offering the supports that we possibly can. This is provincial and federal in terms of funding. We get downloaded on so many things from especially the provincial government that if we continue to put money into this, this continues to be a tax increase. And if you want to look at all of the issues that the city of Wetaskiwin has, it's our crime rate, it's our tax rate, and it's the lack of growth within our city. Well, if you're not willing to be at the table to work through all of that, as well as work with our vulnerable population, that the city is committed to doing, then I can't help you. And I'm sorry that there isn't going to be something that we can work on together. And again, I apologize for this sounding like a lecture on what it is. I'm just really frustrated with the division that's going on right now from the city, through the other agencies and through the community members who are hearing one side of a story or believing what social media has to be sharing as truth, and it absolutely isn't. And there'll be a ton more information coming out from myself and the city regarding the work that we're doing, including this session tonight, and having the coalition in place and getting the community members together to try to solve this issue. Because it's not going to just be the city that's going to be able to solve this. And if the community doesn't want to get on board to help solve this, then I don't know what the solution is going to be. We're never going to find one. So thanks very much for your time. And I sincerely appreciate the work that the Chamber has been doing to bring these people together. We've got, I think there were 60 or so people on the call tonight to be able to listen to this. And I think it's incredible that on a Wednesday night at supper time, that members from our community are willing to be a part of this and looking to find the solutions, but help find the solutions. Creating a division between what the city is or isn't doing isn't going to do it. And I welcome anybody to sit on any one of those coalition boards, FCSS for board positions. All of the work that we're doing within the community are within your grasp to be a part of as well. Being a keyboard warrior isn't going to change the dynamics of the city.
Absolutely well said, Mr. Mayor. There's two things I want to take away from what you just said. Is one, I can't believe we can't believe everything that we hear on social media. I think personally, social media is one of the worst things that's come out of this whole internet revolution. The second thing I would mention, Mr. Mayor, is I always appreciate, and I think all of us at the Chamber have always appreciated your frank and direct approach to problem solving. There aren't many elected officials that you can get a clear and concise answer from, and so we appreciate that very much. I want to maybe, with you and Paul, if that's okay, explore a little bit of this about what you just talked about downloading. We understand how we're starting to understand how these different committees are going to work within Wetaskiwin to address the social challenges there. How do the provincial and federal governments fit into this overall picture, and what are they responsible for, and where do you think you're maybe not getting the help that you need?
I can maybe start with this. The Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee, which I think the Mayor provides some clarification on, that's really where our decision makers from communities that are involved in this are going to sit. That's where a lot of the advocacy and lobbying efforts, it will sit with the Mayor and our City Manager as well, but that committee as well will have a piece to play on how we lobby both the provincial and federal governments. And so I think as we get a better understanding of the needs of our community and start to work together to paint a picture of the issues we are facing and start to gain some traction in our community through solutions that we're implementing without any support, that we hope to catch the eye of both the provincial and federal governments and hopefully bring some funding that is required to do something amazing for many of the issues we spoke about today. One of the things that many people might not know about grant funding is that you typically have to have your project ready to go, shovel ready. And my mention before about us continually being reactive on dealing with these crises and dealing with these issues in our communities. How can you apply for grant funding if you don't know what you need? And so if through coming together through these committees, through all the work that we're doing, we should be able to better advocate at both provincial and federal levels. And we should be a lot more successful in bringing dollars into our community to actually start dealing with these issues in a long-term sustainable way. Mayor, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that. Okay.
Sounds good. We have a few questions in the chat about specific operations of the hub and how they're going to continue to serve the vulnerable population in Wetaskiwin. And I will tell you that we'll just hold those questions until tomorrow. Jessica Hutton, who is the CEO of the Open Door Society, is going to do a session with the Chamber tomorrow at noon. You can find the registration link, it's free, and you can we can take those questions forward and talk specifically about the hub's operations there. This isn't something that the city can comment on, and I certainly can't. So we'll hold those questions as we move to tomorrow's session at noon. I guess my last question is, in a perfect world, what is the city's long-term vision for its vulnerable population? What is it that we're all striving towards, Paul?
And I would love to be the man with answers, Richard. The Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee, ultimately, and as I mentioned before, towards the end of the year, once it's set up, and hopefully sooner, but the whole intention here is to start working together to develop a long-term strategy. When I say long-term, I'm thinking about 20 years out as to what looks different in our community in regards to community safety and well-being, homelessness being one of those pieces. And so I'm not sure exactly what that strategy looks like, how much of it is going to be connected to leading practices, things like housing first and that type of stuff. I'm not exactly sure, but I do know that that's the utmost importance of getting that committee in place is so that we can actually start building that plan. With that plan, being able to identify, document, and verbalize what our longer term outcomes are, what we're striving for, and then being able to measure that so that our community, our agencies, our partners, as we're working together, we can actually see progress towards the work that we're doing together. This stuff is not in place right now, and we desperately need it in place. At the same time, we need folks that are willing to be part of the solution, to be at the right tables through the Guiding Coalition of Homelessness, because we need action today. We know we have an impending crisis upon us. We know that we do not have the solutions, and I plead with those on the call, with those in the community that want to get involved, to please get involved at those tables. I mentioned before, having the right people at the right tables, having the right dialogue, working together, we can do an absolutely incredible things. But doing it in isolation of one another, we will not be able to achieve these things. And so I think that the long-term view for homelessness and what that looks like 20 years from now is, I would say it's very optimistic in Wetaskiwin that perhaps one day we eradicate homelessness. I'm not sure what it looks like, but I know that we are a lot closer now towards that than we were like a year ago. And I, next year when we do this chamber meeting, if the committee's providing an update, we should be able to provide an update of that strategy and to start to present that work. And so there's a lot of good things ahead. I'm extremely optimistic about it. And the only way it can happen, quite frankly, is with community support. It's the only way.
Misty, do you have any final comments?
I think I would echo what Paul was saying. In order to move forward, we need volunteers and we need support on that coalition, because there's a lot of work to be done, a lot of groundwork to move forward. And if we want to see things get better, we need that groundwork done. The grants, like Paul said, some of those grants are a lot of work. I have done grant writing for a lot of years, and you can't just throw them together in a week, because that doesn't work. You need the proper data, you need the proper evidence, you need the proper community partners on the for the letter writing. So without that information, we cannot get the grants that we need to have these long-term solutions like affordable and transitional housing, for food security and those kind of things. So I guess I feel like I'm begging people to volunteer and join these different organizations, because we are really trying to continue this work and think forward and quit doing these Band-Aid solutions and quick responses. So yeah, thank you so much for allowing us to be part of this today.
And I've learned over all my years in serving in municipal government that you always leave the last word to the mayor. So Mayor Gandam, is there anything you'd like to close with?
No, I think I've said enough. Thanks very much.
All right. Well, thank you for being here with us tonight, everybody. And thanks for your thoughtful questions. I'm glad that we had this opportunity to get together and learn more about what the city of Wetaskiwin is doing to support its vulnerable population. If you need more information on the committees, or you have some engagement, if you're a business and you're willing to serve or volunteer, you can email fcss@wetaskiwin.ca. And of course, you can also just email us at info@yourchamber.ca, and we'll get you connected to the right people. I think we can all agree that this discussion is important, because we all want the best for everyone in Wetaskiwin, whether you're a homeless person or someone who's about to become homeless, or whether you're a business owner or a resident or a visitor. And it's always been my strong belief that if people have timely and accurate information, if people are informed, they can make the best decisions. So I'll mention again, the Open Door is having its information session tomorrow at noon, and you can find out more information on that on our website at www.yourchamber.ca. Chamber staff, including me, we're in Wetaskiwin all the time. We'd be eager to hear from you. If you see us, by all means, stop us and we'll have a chat. If you'd like to schedule a visit, we'd be happy to come by and see you. If you have coffee, all the better. And if you don't, then we'll stop by a chamber member business and we'll pick it up and we'll bring it to you. I would like to add, I know we've had some really tough conversations over the past few weeks, and what I admire most about these sessions is the willingness of everybody to come together and to talk and to learn and to share and to listen. And I understand it can be uncomfortable. I know. I worry all the time about using the wrong word or offending somebody with my ignorance. And believe me, I can be pretty ignorant sometimes. But so far, no one from the city or the integrated hub or anybody that I've met on the street walking downtown has made me feel wrong or stupid because I'm less informed about this situation. So I feel like I learn something every time we have one of these sessions. And it's in that spirit of open communication that real progress can happen. So I would say your chamber is really proud to be a facilitator of these information sessions. So thank you for being here tonight, for being a part of these difficult discussions. We know they're important, and we're glad that you're with us on this journey. And I hope you have a good rest of your evening. Thank you.